History being written in Washington, D.C. The trial of U.S. President Donald Trump gets underway. He is only the third president ever to face impeachment. Hello, I'm Arnold Nidal, and this is The Heat. The impeachment trial against Donald Trump began on Tuesday with some fireworks on the Senate floor. Republicans and Democrats disagreeing on a number of issues, including the rules of the proceedings. Those guidelines have now been amended. The battle over witnesses, however, is expected to continue. We're bringing you all the twists and turns as the drama unfolds on Capitol Hill, and that's where we find CGTN's Sean Calebs. And Sean, take us through the day and what we can expect as the trial progresses.
Yeah, and indeed, partisan arguments really setting the tone here today as the questions of how and when the arguments against U.S. President Donald Trump will be spelled out in his impeachment hearing. Now, the Democrats won somewhat of a significant item earlier when House Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell decided that he would allow evidence that was garnered during the House impeachment hearings to be entered in as evidence for senators to consider. And secondly, McConnell and many Republicans wanted the 24 hours of testimony to play out over 2 days. That would mean senators would have had to work well into the night, and there was concern among Republicans that it would look as though they had something to hide. So McConnell backed off, and now the 24 hours will play out over 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But one of the House managers, Representative Adam Schiff, said, make no mistake about it, it is an uphill fight for the House.
Let me be blunt. Let me be very blunt. Right now, a great many, perhaps even most Americans do not believe there will be a fair trial. They don't believe that the Senate will be impartial. They believe that the result is pre-cooked. The president will be acquitted. Not because he is innocent, he is not, but because the senators will vote by party and he has the votes.
Yeah, the big question now is, will witnesses and also documents be allowed into evidence? So far, McConnell is holding firm on that, saying any decision on that will be made after the 3 days of testimony. Trump is charged with abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. This all dates back to a phone call that President Donald Trump had with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, in which Trump asked for, quote, a favor. He wanted Zelensky to investigate his political rival, Vice President Joe Biden, and Biden's son, Hunter. Well, Trump's defense team earlier today saying the House simply has not proved its case.
Why are we here? Are we here because of a phone call? Or are we here before this great body because since the president was sworn into office, there was a desire to see him removed?
And Trump's attorney also went on to say there's simply nothing to the charges, and Trump repeatedly has said that this phone call, in his words, was perfect, and he often goes to Twitter encouraging people to, quote, read the transcripts. Well, the Democrats say there is a great deal to this, and they say it comes down to the future of the democratic process in the United States. That is what is at stake here. So, Anand, indeed, the stakes are high.
Sean, you've been here before, 21 years to be exact, at the trial of former President Bill Clinton. How do these two trials compare?
Really radically different. I think if you go down to the core of them, the United States was much less partisan back then. The two sides were prepared to engage and listen to each other, and a lot of the discussion that so far has gone on behind closed doors, especially among the Republicans. Basically, everything Mitch McConnell did, he did behind closed doors, then came out and had enough votes to move things forward. Well, in the past, that was brought out 21 years ago. The two sides, Tom Daschle, a senator back then, and Trent Lott, a Republican senator, they were more engaged and talked openly about their differences. Now, the two sides are so polarized, there is virtually no common ground.
Thanks, Sean. That's Sean Calebs there for us from Capitol Hill. Well, let's bring in our panel. With us here in Washington, Rob Waters is a Republican strategist and founder and managing partner of the Madison Group. Nate Lerner joins us from New York. He's co-founder and executive director of Build the Wave, a group promoting Democratic candidates. Joining us from Fort Lauderdale in Florida, Christopher Metzler is a conservative analyst and senior advisor to a Republican candidate running for mayor in Baltimore. And Scott Lucas is a professor of U.S. politics at the University of Birmingham in the United Kingdom. Welcome to all of you to the show. Christopher, let me start with you. Lots of debate today in the Senate hearing about rules, as we've just heard. How will this trial go to? Where will it go to from here? The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, who's Republican, he gave in to Democratic demands on issues of evidence. That's what can be accepted into the trial. And the time frame for the debate. In fact, one online news company, Vice News, said that he blinked. Why did McConnell give in to those demands?
Look, bottom line is, first of all, I don't think that that he blinked. I think that as a practical matter, he understood from the standpoint of here's the thing that people need to understand about the majority leader. He can count. He counts very well. He knows what votes he has and what votes he doesn't have. And so in this particular case, he didn't have the votes to move forward, so he changed directions. That's simple. It's fair. It's reasonable. So I'm not sure that he blinked. The debate here is around witnesses and evidence. That is ultimately the debate. I mean, based on what I heard today, this is like a bad movie. Bad actors, bad evidence, bad facts, and we all know how it's going to end. And at the end of the day, this is Democrats pushing an agenda to remove the President of the United States. That's what it is. They know that. And for Schiff to talk about things that have been done behind closed doors, give me a break.
Nate Lerner, what do you make of this? Is this an effort by the Democrats to get rid of a president they don't like? As we just heard, it's like a movie. Are these bad actors, bad evidence, bad facts?
No, not at all. And what's really interesting about that statement is it gets to the heart of the impeachment and the Democrats and the Republicans' entire defense, which is simply attempting to poke holes in the Democrats' case and complaining about their evidence, calling it a witch hunt, complaining about the rules, just really complaining every single step of the way, while not providing any evidence of their own. And so we've heard plenty of from the Republicans about why, there's a problem with this evidence or with that. But at the same time, they haven't provided a single shred of evidence defending the president. Meanwhile, every single day we hear more and more stories.
Rob, go ahead, Nate.
We hear more and more stories being reported that prove that Donald Trump withheld government money that was meant for foreign aid in order to pressure another nation to investigate one of his political rivals, which we also know, thanks to the Government Accountability Office, is illegal. And those are the facts.
I mean, Nate, with all degree of respect, I don't let fact get in the way of a good story, but Republicans don't have to present evidence. The House of Representatives are charged as managers, and you are innocent until proven guilty. And to go to the point about the majority leader, it's not about that he's counting votes. He's having respect for people who are running. Everyone knows Susan Collins is going to need those 2 days to show that she indeed is the bipartisan human being that she is in Maine. To the point that my colleague here, Nate, is trying to make about poking holes, they've been litigating this election since day one. They had nothing in Russia. They had nothing in evidence. So you're talking about behind the scenes. The Democrats allowed no witnesses, no rebuttal witnesses in the Intelligence Committee, and then held this impeachment process for 28 days before presenting it to the Senate. If anything, this is a bloody game.
Rob, we just heard in that excerpt from our reporter on Capitol Hill, we heard Adam Schiff, who is the lead manager, saying that the result is pre-cooked. They're going to vote according to party lines. So what's the point of it all?
I mean, one might ask somebody, what is the point of it all? Yeah. I mean, you're presenting a case that has not been proven with evidence. You've had documents that have been turned over to the Department of Justice but not heard on the House committee. You're bringing it to the Senate, and you're expecting that you are going to allow new evidentiary process into what is already in a trial. I mean, what does one expect for fair and impartial?
All right, let me go to Scott Lucas. Scott, looking broadly at what is going on in Washington, does this case have merit, or is it a political move by the Democrats to get rid of a president they don't like, whom they have not liked, as Rob just pointed out, from day one?
Well, there are two narratives. And there's a narrative of political spin. I know it well from Donald Trump. I know it well from his attorneys. I know it well from Mr. Metzler and Mr. Waters. That is to simply assert and misrepresent this is a hoax, this is a witch hunt, this has no merit, there is no evidence, when in fact the other narrative is in fact the evidence. We know from 18 witnesses, 17 of them current and former U.S. officials, that there was a 10-month campaign, not just one phone call, by Donald Trump and his personal attorney Rudy Giuliani to pressure Ukraine to investigate Joe Biden, to tarnish him, to investigate, to cover up Russia's involvement in the 2016 election. Several of those 18 witnesses were involved in the Trump-Giuliani campaign. People like Lev Parnas, Ambassador Gordon Sondland, Ambassador Kurt Volker. We know that the White House, to prevent that evidence from coming out, told current and former officials to defy subpoenas, to effectively risk violating the law and not appear before the House.
Yeah.
And we know that Donald Trump, as part of the pressure campaign on Ukraine, withheld military aid and denied a visit to the White House by his president. Now, we know that from the witnesses. That is the evidence. The attempt by the Senate Majority Leader to block documents, to block witnesses, and to not allow any evidence. His concession today is a minor concession.
Okay.
I'll allow the House evidence in, but only after we've heard the statements. That is basically, do you choose to have a fair trial and do you uphold the Constitution?
Yeah.
Or do you railroad this under the sham call of it's all a hoax?
All right. Christopher, you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, while I appreciate the statement that was just made by my colleagues, my colleague, it simply isn't true. Look, at the end of the day, what we have here, the House had the opportunity to make its case, which it did not. This is very simple. In the case of this,
that opportunity, Christopher.
what this
the White House
in the
blocked
case,
that.
Scott, I'll get to you, Chris.
The White House did.
The White House told all
White
officials
House
not to
used
testify.
all tools that it had at its disposal, as any competent counsel would advise.
Blocking subpoenas is not a tool.
All of
Well,
the
wait,
tools
no, but
that it
exerting
had.
presidential privilege is, as has been the same thing that the Obama administration did numerous times.
Right.
Same thing. I mean, let's
He did
just
not
let's
assert
just
privilege.
be let's just
He
be
did not
clear.
assert privilege.
There is.
He did not assert privilege.
You have asked
That's okay.
for counsel
I'll
to
get
waive.
furious.
It's exerting privilege.
Fast and Furious.
All right. Go ahead, Rob.
I mean,
He did not exert presidential privilege.
Certainly
stick to
he
the
did.
facts.
Well, you wanted Scipione to testify. It's against presidential privilege.
When
It is.
did he cite- when did he
Listen,
cite
I don't want to
executive
argue
privilege?
sovereign
What
immunity,
counsel
but
can't testify.
you can't. I mean, you're asking to waive
don't argue
counsel
facts?
testimony in this. You cannot do that. That is a hoax. It's a lawyer's trick. Come on.
Precisely.
All right, Christopher, I want to ask you something else. There have been fears
He
expressed,
defied
as we've just
subpoenas.
heard. One moment, Scott. There have been fears expressed by Democrats that this trial will be one-sided. Here's Adam Schiff again. Let's listen to what he said today.
If you only get to see part of the evidence, if you only allow one side or the other a chance to present their full case, your verdict will be predetermined by the bias in the proceeding. If the defendant is not allowed to introduce evidence of his innocence, it's not a fair trial. So too for the prosecution. If the House cannot call witnesses or introduce documents and evidence, it's not a fair trial. It's not really a trial at all.
So, Christopher, what Adam Schiff is saying there is that the Republicans are going to have their thumb on the scales of justice.
Well, okay, so Adam Schiff, pot, meat, kettle, if that is in fact the case. Because from the standpoint of predetermined, from the standpoint, Schiff is going about talking about this is a vote that is partisan among party lines. Oh, I'm sorry, the articles that came out from the House strictly partisan, number one. Number two, and how long did the Speaker withhold the articles of impeachment? Why didn't she just send them over? I guess it wasn't that important. Look, at the end of the day, if Schiff wants to talk about partisanship, he needs to hold the mirror up to himself.
Okay, Nate, that point that Christopher raises about those articles of impeachment being held up in the House by Nancy Pelosi, that was seized upon by one of the president's lawyers today. This is what he had to say. Let's watch.
They held these articles for 33 days. We hear all this talk about an overwhelming case. an overwhelming case that they're not even prepared today to stand up and make an opening argument about. That's
the delay. And did it backfire on the Democrats?
I don't believe so. I think that Nancy Pelosi knew exactly what she was doing. The Democrats were fighting for more fair rules, which they eventually did get when Mitch McConnell did in fact blink. And at the same time, too, you're limiting the president's narrative. They want the Republicans, as far as they're concerned, they want to speed this up as quick as possible. They want to acquit Trump. They want to get this through the Senate. They don't want to drag this out. They don't want this hanging around in the media. And they just want to move on from it.
So
the truth is, the American people
it was good to
deserve
hold
to hear
it
the
for a
facts.
month and keep it in the media. The only thing that she's done is keep Bernie Sanders and Klobuchar and Professor Warren from campaigning. What possible gain could you not have had for righteous of, I mean, the right of speedy trial, please?
This is irrelevant. The fact of the matter right now is a vast majority of Americans want to hear from witnesses. They want to hear from John Bolton. They want to hear from Mick Mulvaney. They want to see the evidence. They want to have a fair trial. And what's happening now is the Senate, Republicans in the Senate have seized control and prevented that from happening. The White House has refused to turn over documents or provide really any evidence of that matter of Trump's innocence. And so as a result, you're not going to have a fair trial. You're not going to have the evidence aired. And it's really just, they're going to be able to move on and acquit Trump just like they wanted. But at the end of the day, what the Republicans are doing is essentially a cover-up, and it's absolutely shameful.
Okay, Scott, what did you make of the Democrats in the House, their handling of the process so far?
Well, I mean, the Democratic House managers are there as prosecutors to present the case, and they have focused on presenting evidence and facts, and they have effectively called out Trump's defense team for not actually engaging with that evidence. Let's be very clear about a couple of points here, because there's a little bit of misrepresentation. The reason why the articles of impeachment were held up was very simple, and that is because Mitch McConnell was blocking witnesses and documents. He is doing that even today. In other words, the charge of obstruction of Congress, which has been filed because the White House tried to block all witnesses illegally in basically telling them to reject subpoenas.
So the delay.
Wait. Where is it illegal? Affirmed by what court, Supreme or U.S.? Where is what he has done illegal? Show me the law. Cite me the law.
Defiance of subpoenas.
Cite me the law.
Defiance of subpoenas. Defiance of. Excuse me, I'm answering your question. Yeah. Defiance of subpoenas without just cause, if you or I did it, would be illegal. The White House defied subpoenas. It has not come up in a court yet because of these proceedings, but it is an impeachable offense. Mitch McConnell is continuing to say,
it hasn't come up, Professor, with great degree of respect. There's limited sovereign immunity as guaranteed in the Constitution. I mean, is this a fact, or are we just going to play?
That's an irrelevant statement. We are that's a word salad that actually doesn't apply here. You have.
Why doesn't it not apply?
It is a word salad. If you are serious about this, if you are serious about this, take this in 1974, as Richard Nixon did, to the court and test executive privilege. But the White House has not done that. Instead, it bypassed that by telling witnesses not to testify.
Yep.
And when 17 witnesses defied the White House and did testify, they then tried to trash the witnesses, say they were disloyal, say that they were not telling the truth. Now, we can agree that Donald Trump may not deserve to be convicted on the basis of the evidence. But to try to sweep away the evidence is like a defendant in a criminal trial saying, I don't want to hear a witness talk about how I stole the money from the bank.
Well,
okay,
I
don't
want to hear
the prosecutor.
No, with all degree of respect, if it were an actual defendant in a criminal trial, it has a preponderance of innocence. You are innocent until proven guilty. You cannot say that you have to present where your innocence is. You have to
allow the evidence.
You know, are we making a mistake here, Nate, by looking at this as a criminal trial? This is not a criminal trial, is it? It's a legal proceeding, isn't it? Rather, a political proceeding.
Well, it is technically
a criminal proceeding.
Well, at this point, we're
at
this point we're in the Senate. At this point in the Senate, it is a criminal proceeding, and I really do want to harp on this because it's so easy to get bogged down in the nuance of what's happening with the rules and with the legality of it. But really, at the end of the day, it's really, really, really simple, and Democrats need to stick to that message, which is that the president broke the law. He attempted to get a foreign nation to influence our election using government money, and they're now covering up the evidence for that to prevent the American people from learning the truth. And at the same time, they've yet to provide a single shred of evidence proving Trump's innocence.
Where did he attempt to get a foreign government to come into our election?
I'm
sorry, what Twitter, Facebook narrative is this?
Provide evidence of that innocence. What evidence do you have that Donald Trump is innocent? Just name one piece of evidence
With
you have.
great degree of respect, you don't have to provide evidence of innocence. You have to prove guilt.
That's not an answer.
Oh my God. Well, this is like day one of law school.
One piece of evidence, and I will agree with you.
All right.
One piece of evidence.
Okay, Rob, let me ask you this. Reviewing the events of the past few weeks, recently we had close associates of the president, Rudy Giuliani's he's the president's personal lawyer. Well, one of his associates, Lev Parnas, used to work with Rudy Giuliani, and he's saying, look, the president knew exactly what he was up to in these dealings with Ukraine.
Yeah, but, okay, and I am not here to defend Rudy Giuliani and whatsoever.
Yeah.
If there has been a crime that is committed, nobody has proven direct chain to the president. Now, are people around him? With degree of respect. Are people around him suggesting in a court of what? Public opinion? Go to court, affirm it, swear it under oath, read it out in front of a grand jury, indict it, and try it in the Southern District like they're supposed to.
You know, Christopher, the president makes a lot of the transcript of that telephone call. Does that exonerate him in any way?
Well, in fact, I think it does. I mean, the president's absolutely clear. What did he do wrong in that phone call? And here's the other aspect of this. Let me just go back to this conversation about the close associates of Rudy Giuliani. I'm sorry. So this guy's going out, blah blah blah. Rudy did this, blah blah blah. The president was involved, Barr was involved, blah blah blah. Yeah. Okay. First of all, he's trying to find a lighter sentence. Second of all, as far as I know, the Southern District has not even given him immunity at this point. And so to me, this whole conversation about him really is irrelevant to the case at hand. And by the way, part of the process, part of the reason, I guess, the Speaker had for holding the articles of impeachment was to let so-called evidence drip, drip, drip. And in this particular case, so you have less going out there talking, showing pictures, blah, blah, blah. Okay, very interesting, but completely irrelevant. And from the standpoint of the House, the House had the opportunity to prove its case, which it did not
dismissing evidence without providing any of your own.
Okay, Scott, go ahead.
What evidence? He has no evidence. He just has gossip and innuendo.
Go ahead, Scott.
Let's have the facts. Lev Parnas was the point man who was instructed by Rudy Giuliani to have the discussions with the Ukrainians to press for the investigations. Rudy Giuliani, in turn, took that at the direction of Donald Trump.
How do you know that?
That is what Lev Parnas' documents established.
How do you know that?
He has said.
No, that is not what was said. You are saying that a counsel to the president directed somebody, and there's a one-off, and it's under client privilege.
I'm answering the. Rob, please, I'm answering your question. The documents which were released last week, which include emails and documents, as well as Lev Parnas' testimony, directly implicate Rudy Giuliani. Lev Parnas' first-hand testimony of conversations in which he was involved with Giuliani and Trump establish that Trump directed this.
No.
The reason why the House did not have Lev Parnas' testimony when it had the impeachment hearings is because it was under court seal at that point.
No, that's a leap,
It was
Scott.
unsealed
That
last
is a
week.
leap.
It
That
is
is an
additional evidence.
absolute leap.
It is additional. It is no, that's.
I will
those
buy
are the
you a
facts, Rob.
case
I'll
of any
continue.
whiskey you want if
It
you
is
can show
exactly-
direct relationship from the president to Parnas. Any. Balvenie 21, my friend. You show it to me, it will be shipped tomorrow.
Send me the maker's mark.
Done deal.
Send me the maker's mark
But
right
by
now,
virtue,
because I will show
I
you
want
the
a
hundreds
case
of pages
if you can show me where
Now,
Donald
now,
Trump
let us-
directed
Rob,
Parnas.
Okay, I don't want to be a broker for whiskey transactions here, but Nate, let me get to you. Let's talk about the president himself. The president, of course, is in Davos right now. He continues to call this entire process a hoax. He was asked by a reporter today about events back here in Washington. Let's take a listen to that.
Well, we're here meeting with world leaders, the biggest, most important people in the world, and we're bringing back tremendous business to the United States, and they're all here to see. I'll be making a speech, and then we'll be leaving shortly. But I think it's very important. The other's just a hoax. It's the witch hunt that's been going on for years, and frankly, it's disgraceful.
So, Nate, the line the president is taking here, and he's taking a very political line. Look, I'm here in Davos. I'm doing the people's business. Back there in Washington, the Democrats are trying to get rid of me.
Well, the Democrats are doing the people's business, too. They were elected with a mandate, which is to hold Trump accountable. That was why Democrats came out in record numbers in 2018, was in order to get a Democratic House to protect against just this, to hold him accountable, to make sure that something like this doesn't go unnoticed, doesn't go unpunished. And that's exactly what would have happened. If we had not won in 2018, Trump would not be held accountable in any way. You would not see any of this evidence being aired. There wouldn't have been any investigation. It all exists because Democrats won. So we have a mandate to hold him accountable. And a lot of these Democrats, they're simply doing what their voters want. And if you look at by the numbers, a majority of Americans actually believe Trump should be impeached based on the evidence, and an even higher majority want a thorough investigation and the evidence aired. And on the flip side, though, you have Republicans actively working to cover this up and prevent that from happening. And so Trump is completely off base by throwing these accusations around.
It is a trite narrative.
It's the truth, though. What's happening then? You tell me.
I believe that law is playing out the way it should be, and despite any assertion of whatever you're reading in the New York Times of Lev Parnas, that is under the jurisdiction of the Southern District of New York, which, unless you're calling them a political being, still knows how to investigate and prosecute.
Okay. Christopher, one more point. Nate cited a few polls there, and the polls actually show that people in the United States, those people who were polled, are in favor of impeachment, are in favor of conviction.
Yeah, well, you know, as it relates to the polls, I don't put a whole lot of stock in polls. I never have put a whole lot of stock in polls. And so the latest poll I saw was 51%. Okay, all right, got it. At the end of the day, as it relates to Democrats, I do, however, want to thank Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats for doing a brilliant job in helping to get the president reelected in a landslide in 2020.
Well,
so do come out in droves to do that again.
Right, he has not been reelected yet. Scott, very quickly, looking at this process, I've only got 30 seconds, Scott, looking at this process that's taking place right now, is this going to be the new normal in the United States? Every time the House of Representatives is led by a party that's in opposition to the president, are we going to have an impeachment coming up?
It's beyond this. If you do not hold a president, a legislator to accountability when there is substantial evidence, if you deflect from that, if you shout witch hunt, hoax, if you shut down the evidence, if you misrepresent the evidence, whether it's Lev Parnas, Gordon Sondland, Kurt Volker, Marie Yovanovitch, you are stomping on the American Constitution, and you are threatening to damage and undermine the American system, because
we have to go.
Not
Scott,
just Donald Trump,
all right,
can commit a crime in the White House and get away with it.
Okay, we have to go. Time's run out. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Arnold Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.